In Duluth, Minnesota, the heart of America's Northland, we are at the intersection of what it means to serve in the military and what it means to be a Northlander.
How we remember the veterans who fought for our country says a lot about who we are.
As soon as this armory was open, there was active deployment protecting not only our state but the nation. That was back in 1916.
That tradition in Minnesota of always being ready to serve no matter the hardships is a proud legacy.
Probably it's not going to be what you expect. There's a lot of things that happen that probably shouldn't talk about ever again.
As we remember those who lost their lives, we pray that you would surround families and friends and all who grieve.
We have to do it, and it has to be done.
Minnesota has a pretty rich history of service in the U.S. Army specifically, dating back to the Civil War.
When Abraham Lincoln called for soldiers, so the 1st Minnesota was the beginning of major military activities.
The drummer boy of the Civil War, his memory, and that his legacy lives on.
When stitched together, there are key events that create the broad and complex tapestry that is American military history.
Code talkers, they were still held in secrecy.
I had a top security clearance.
They could be flying this way, look over their right shoulder, lock onto a target.
Taliban was literally right on the other side of the gate.
The tragic events of September 11th, our own 148th Air National Guard Bulldogs were immediately called into action.
Understanding these events from a Northland perspective helps bring context to how our region fits into our nation.
My first deployment was in Iraq.
Kabul, Afghanistan, during the collapse of the Afghan government.
I took the bullets out of my gun, and for the rest of my 397 days in war.
And how our service members define us.
But somebody's got to defend the country.
I have to go over this a couple times. Stand by.
2026 marks the 250th anniversary of America's founding. As we celebrate this milestone, it's incumbent on us to take a look back at the history of Northlanders in the military so that their stories do not get lost in time.
This one is stubborn. These grassroots just go deep.
Yeah, we've done, I don't know, she's told you how much we've done up there, basically, well, that whole top, which is the War Memorial stones.
I was accepted to the Daughters of the American Revolution, and each new member has to do a community project. The project that my team and I are working on is cleaning the markers that are of veterans. Civil War, Spanish-American War, World War I, and there are a few World War II burials in this section as well.
5 more years, these people aren't going to know what these stones are. They'll just disappear.
So in order for me to belong to the DAR, I had to prove lineal descent from a soldier in the Revolutionary War or a supporter of the Revolutionary War.
So, and any woman who joins the DAR has to prove that lineage, every generation from herself up to the patriot. You have to prove, the dates of birth, dates of death, marriage dates, and so it's pretty rigorous. But once it gets done, there's this great database that the DAR has of revolutionary patriots and people who descend from them.
Clearly the immigrants who've come to this area are an independent bunch. I mean, you have to be. Can you imagine? Can you imagine, like my ancestor got on a ship when he was 15 by himself from Germany, sailed across the ocean, went to Pennsylvania, was in the Revolutionary War, started a family. Oh my gosh, how do you even do that when you're 15?
It's fun for me to see what these people did, where they lived, their kids, family. And not necessarily, a lot of these people were just regular people, just like you and me.
And I said to one of the groundskeepers, 3 of these guys seem to be missing. I don't, where are they? And they said, well, Kathleen, you're standing on them. I went, okie dokie, right? I didn't realize where I was standing. So I can show you where the blank spots are. 2 missing here and 1 missing there. 1 from World War I and 2 from the Civil War. I don't like blank spots. In research, in history, I don't like not knowing. And so I began searching, and I went to Congressman Stauber's office to ask for some help. We got one of the monuments here. It's in the, it'll be installed this fall.
Kathleen isn't the only one we've met on the journey of making this documentary, working to fill in the gaps of our local military history.
Every woman who was alive during World War II did something, right? But if you watch the movies and read most of the books about World War II, they're not even mentioned. Women were in all of the major battles throughout the war. Women from Minnesota. I never would have imagined, being from Minnesota myself, that there were Minnesota women who became spies.
Further efforts to fill in the gaps in American history can be seen at the Duluth International Airport. Here sits a monument to Joseph Gomer, a Tuskegee airman who flew 68 missions in World War II. Along with all Tuskegee airmen, he was recognized in 2007 with the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest award given by Congress. And the effort to recognize the contributions of all service members is ongoing.
Oh, there's huge gaps in American history, mostly about our indigenous history of this country.
I am honored to be part of an ethnic group who has the highest rate of service than any other racial demographic.
America could do a lot more to find out its history and to honor and even put the effort out to learn about things like our code talkers, or that they're even were local ones. Code talkers were Native Americans who were recruited during World War I and World War II to use our traditional languages as codes to disrupt the Japanese and other enemies of the country from being able to understand what the correspondence were during the wars. One day I got a call from a lady in Washington, D.C. by the name of Betty Birdsong. And she called and she said that she had been calling around the country looking for this one fellow who was a code talker, and they couldn't find him. This fellow by the name of Lex Porter. And I say to myself, I know Lex Porter. He's a family friend of mine, and his sons are some of my closest friends. Unfortunately, at the time, Lex had passed away. He never told his family even that he was a code talker. The U.S. Senate honored the families or the living code talkers. They were all invited out to the U.S. Senate, and Lex's family went out there, and as honoring the tribes who had code talkers, each tribe was created a specific medal honoring the code talker from that tribe. They weren't recognized for their service because they were still held in secrecy. Code talkers had to swear allegiance and that they would not reveal that they were code talkers, and that was why they were able to use code talkers again, because of the secrecies that they were all sworn to. And that held true even all the way to his family, to the end of Lex's life. All that he ever said was that, oh, I was a radio man. And so they were quite stunned and quite honored to find out all the effort that their father had and husband had put into being in the service for this country. A question was answered for not only the family, but for this country.
I grew up in South St. Paul. I spent my weekends on the reservation, but growing up I was called names and beat up, and I went to a white school. I was the only Native American. So I was very happy when I joined the military because there was no discrimination. There were people of all races. That was such a relief. It was so welcoming. My mother was from the Fond du Lac Reservation, and she had to get her parents' permission to enlist in the military. And it was the first time she had ever taken a train ride. And, you know, when she got down south, they had signs, you know, colored only and for the restrooms and stuff. And she didn't know, you know, which one to go in. So she just stayed on the train, you know, because there was a lot of racism then. But she was stationed in Okinawa. But it was a very positive experience for her, and she encouraged all of us, all my brothers and sisters. There were 5 of us, and we all went in the Army.
I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1969. I did my training at boot camp in MCRD, San Diego. And they used to call that, anybody that went to boot camp in the West Coast were Hollywood Marines. I was in Vietnam in 1970 through 1971 as a field radio operator, which was a pretty drastic position to be in Vietnam. Of course, the enemy would always try to knock out the radio man and silence the radio and lose control. So, as a matter of fact, the day before I graduated in boot camp, we had our drill instructor give us our MOS, which is Military Occupational Specialty. And he called my name and he said, "Danielson, you're going to be 2531, which is code for field radio operator." And he said, "You're the first one to get shot." So that was kind of disheartening to hear that, but thankfully I served my time in Vietnam and I survived and came back unscathed, so to speak. I can remember in the 4th grade, my teacher, Miss Lumblad, asked all our students in the 4th grade class what they wanted to do when they grew up. And we all got one at a time up in front of the class and we expressed what our ambitions were. And when it was my turn to talk, and I got up in front of the class and I said, "I want to join the service. I want to be a police officer, and I want to get married." And when I said I want to get married, the whole class erupted because they had never heard of a young guy like that, just wanting to get married, and that was one of my goals. So, and I reached all my goals.
I joined in 1978. I was active duty through 1981, and then I did 8 years active Army Reserve. And I was in the CID, which is the Criminal Investigative Department for the soldiers. That got into some trouble in the military. So we would read the cases and assign military offense codes to their civilian offenses. So hopefully they could spend their time in a military prison and not a civilian prison overseas. I got recruited to the CID is because they were having racial problems in Baltimore and they didn't want to, they told me they couldn't recruit black or white, so I was Native American, they recruited a Hawaiian girl and a Mexican girl, and they didn't pass their security clearances, but I did. I was 17. I had a top security clearance, and I really enjoyed my time in the military. It was the best years of my life.
Of course, I saw a lot of bad things happening in Vietnam, and when I came back from my tour, during my tenure as a police officer, I saw a lot of tragedy. Consequently, I was diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I've been getting counseling from the vet center in Duluth. It's hard to keep these feelings inside without, it's like festering, and if you continue to hold it inside, you're just going to hurt yourself. There's 13 of us, all combat veterans from Vietnam, and so we support each other. It's been a healing process from what we experienced.
I was in the Navy. 1990 to 1995, right out of high school. I was stationed in Holy Loch, Scotland on the USS Simon Lake, and then in Norfolk, Virginia on the USS Shenandoah. I used to live in Eau Claire. My manager was a disabled vet and he couldn't walk some days. I don't want to go to the VA, even though I broke my knee or his leg or something along those lines while he was in the military and it was bothering him. I don't want to go to the VA because I'm taking it away from somebody who really needs it. And I was like, are you kidding me? This happened to you. You went into the military 100% and you come out less than. You go get help. When you walk into a room, you might not feel comfortable. You don't know anybody. But when you walk into a room full of veterans, you feel at ease. There's always somebody to talk to. You have something in common with every single person in that room.
So I want to say thank you so much for making our military and our country a better place. Happy Veterans Day.
We made it.
First of all, what day is it?
Veterans Day. We're honoring veterans with a free meal.
How many years have you been doing this?
Well,
2009.
Wow.
Oh no, we were doing it before then. I mean, they went overseas in a war zone and put their life on the line to protect our freedoms. So that's why it's very, very important.
And I did 20, and a year of that was in Saudi Arabia for Desert Storm. So I seen firsthand what combat can do. And I'd rather, as they used to say, I'd rather fight them over there than fight them here.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Jesse Peterson with the Air Force. Every Veterans Day, the students and cadets from Air Force ROTC, Det 420 at UMD, they hold a 24-hour Veterans Vigil. So they started at midnight yesterday and it goes all through Veterans Day till midnight tonight, 30-minute shifts, standing guard at the flag. They do that really for two reasons. One is that it's to help our cadets who are going to be future officers in the Air Force to kind of remember the legacy that they're about to enter, the legacy of our veterans and the service and sacrifice that they've made. And the other reason they do it is because it's also a reminder to the community. It's a reminder of them standing out here, of all the folks that have come before us.
Reminders of our military history can be found in many Northland communities, whether in the form of a monument or, in some cases, a museum honoring local veterans. From interactive exhibits at the renowned Richard I. Bong Veterans Historical Center in Superior, Wisconsin, all the way over to the Iron Range in Chisholm.
Mostly every town you go through, they got some kind of a memorial thing for the service. They never had nothing much years ago. When them poor guys come back from Vietnam, there was no talk at all about them. But now it's different. Served in the Army in 1963 in September, and I got 6 years I put in, and I got out in September of '69. I was on maintenance, so I did in dry truck, and I worked on tanks like behind us here. You know, years ago there was a draft that was on when we were young, and lots of people laughed about going in.
Are you a member of the American Legion post that installed the memorial?
Right, I've been on there about pretty close to 20 years. Yeah, it's a 247 in Chisholm here. We were responsible for all this stuff out here. Mostly I worked on that helicopter there, I worked on that, and that big job on the corner, that Navy anchor. I have a lot of people that I know, you know, A lot of them are gone already. And a lot of old-timers, I worked for a lot of World War II people. We had quite a few in Chisholm, and it's scarce right now.
While certain pieces of history have been literally cemented in our regional geography, we see others that are at risk of slipping away.
The Duluth Armory was built in 1915, and as all armories, of course, they were a training facility for the military. This specifically was for the National Guard and the Naval Militia Reserve, but also a main function of an armory, wherever they're located, is for community use. This is where the community came together for everything from musical events, and it also served the community in times of crisis and disaster. In 1918, there was a fire in Moose Lake, so this was a refuge location.
I started attending military functions at this armory at the age of 16. A friend of mine encouraged me to join the Civil Air Patrol that met one night a week down at the armory up on the top floor.
I was promoted to lieutenant colonel and given command of the tank battalion.
Was that here at the armory?
That was here at the armory.
So we had tanks, infantry, reconnaissance, and artillery all in one platoon. You know, what more could a new lieutenant hope for?
I had the responsibility for probably 10 or 12 other people. I had responsibility for their welfare, their training, and the equipment that they used. That is a pretty significant responsibility for a young guy.
Oh, this was solid vehicles. Jeeps on one side and trucks on the other. They were highly secure rooms. We kept all of our M16s and pistols and other machine guns and M60s in those rooms, and they were highly secured.
Wow, what is that, about 8 inches of
Yeah, there's actually a door on both sides.
Wow, ammunition vault doors. This is the actual fire room. After they shoot, then they wheel them back in so then they can look at their target and then mark it on the wall. The shells and debris would go down here.
During the Cold War, there actually was a command center that was located here in this building.
Under what is the main stage now that was built in 1941, underneath is another space.
And there was a anti-aircraft group.
And as the story goes, this is where the maps were displayed so that operations could be monitored.
And their mission was to destroy enemy aircraft that would be coming in from the Canadian border.
The stage is right above us. This was a very, very important piece of our history. Simultaneously, teenagers are dancing and making the floor rock when there's naval militia training going on, to keep us safe so that we can enjoy, the American dream of dancing to your teen idol.
This armory has been around for a long time, and it has gone through periods of wartime, preparation for war, preparation for riot control. Over its years has been a major part of the defense of this country and provided trained troops for whatever needed to be done to accomplish the mission. Part of the historical value of this building is to recognize all of the thousands and thousands and thousands of troops that went through this facility.
Albert Wilson was the last living Civil War veteran who was actually from Duluth. And his funeral and memorial service was held right here in the Duluth Armory. And it was a national event. Life magazine covered it. The balcony, the whole floor was completely filled. And then there was a procession that also went up to the cemetery where he's buried. And an interesting note is that he was actually a drummer boy, and this historic, iconic building is known now for its arts and music, and so it's kind of fitting that the drummer boy of the Civil War, that his memory and that his legacy lives on.
The intent is to create at least a room in this building with artifacts and memorabilia to honor the units that have been here and what they've done.
As some military facilities in the Northland exist in a state of limbo, others are state-of-the-art. The mission of the 148th Fighter Wing in Duluth is to provide mission-ready pilots to succeed against current and future threats. It is the largest military hub in the Northland and plays a vital role in the defense of our nation.
I'm Master Sergeant Jeremy Manthe. I work at the 148th Fighter Wing in Duluth, Minnesota, in aircrew flight equipment. Anything that the pilot that touches his body when they go and fly their mission, we maintain. We inspect it, take it apart, it gets put onto an interval cycle, we look at it, fix it, put it back together. My dad had spent 20 years in the Air Force, and so it was something I entertained to do myself. I've been here for 20 years as of this November. So this is known to us as a post-flight room, but this is where all the pilots keep all of their flying gear. So in the morning they'll come in here, they'll do a pre-flight, some of the stuff that they fly with on a daily basis. Again, each person has a helmet with an oxygen mask. Another piece of the puzzle is the flight harness. This is actually an inflatable flotation device they wear around their neck for every flight. Pull these two red handles, it'll inflate to like 4 times the size. If they are unconscious and these dip into the water, they have what's called the universal water activation system, because it works in salt or fresh. These things will inflate automatically even if the handles aren't pulled. So even if they're unconscious, this will still inflate, keep their head above water. Last, the most common thing they fly with on a daily basis, this is called the G-suit. So what this does is, this has one huge continuous bladder. It wraps around both sets of their legs just like a giant pair of snow pants. This gets hooked up to bleed air in the airplane, so air that's generated off the motor that bleeds off. It fills this bladder up and it squeezes their legs really, really hard, and it pushes all the blood from their lower extremities up into their upper extremities, to their head, to their heart, so that they can help pull more G's effectively without having to strain so hard so they can focus on flying. We call this the egress training room because this is set up to teach both pilots and people who would be going for a ride in the back seat. Anybody who's going to fly into an F-16 has to go through this process, and that's that egress process. So in here they get to practice what it's like pulling the ejection handle. Top Gun, you saw him trying to reach above his head. They got rid of that system. That's right here. This is where you pull the ejection handle. I'm 6'1". There's not a lot of room in here. And this is a JHMIC system, stands for Joint Helmet Mounted Cueing System. So what we have here is a display unit that projects airplane information onto the visor. So when I fit this to a pilot, I make sure that they can see the entirety of that grid in front of their eye, and then that's where all the information would be located. A pilot can use this technology. Back in the day, they'd have to actually kind of like point the airplane in the general direction of where they wanted to target. Now today, they could be flying this way, look over their right shoulder, lock onto a target, and engage that target by just simply looking at it rather than having to point the whole airplane that way. So here's what the parachute looks like, okay? 40-foot table. You have, at one end, the canopy will come out 28 feet, and then you have another 28 to 14 feet of risers and straps. So the parachute will start down there and it'll stretch all the way to these 2 bolts where we anchor it to the table so we can put it under tension for inspection. This is everything that goes inside of a survival kit. We have to take all of this stuff and pack it in there. So you've got these survival module with water purification tablets, all like weatherproof matches, weatherproof tinder, signaling mirror. It is on their person. This specifically in this board is going to be attached to their butt when they hook up to that harness. The hardest part about being in the military, in my opinion, is leaving my family. It is the most difficult part of it because you miss out on all the moments. Once I became a father, it became even more difficult. I've definitely done my fair share of deployments over the years. I've been to Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, now Japan, and those were a lot easier when I was younger. It definitely doesn't get any easier as you get older, but Yeah, leaving my family is very difficult because life seems to go on pause when you leave for deployments, and when you get back, you have to reintegrate into a system that's been moved on without you, and so that gets to be really tricky. So it's the missing them and the reintegration that makes it difficult.
Along with securing the air above us, another feature of strategic importance in our region is Lake Superior.
The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary is the volunteer civil portion of the Coast Guard. We mind our military P's and Q's. We wear uniforms, earn ranks, earn decorations, but we don't fire weapons and we don't harm people. Our mission is to rescue people. Thanks to the Great Lakes, Duluth is the largest inland port in perhaps the world, if not just the country. And of course, the Coast Guard presence on this lake is important because of all that shipping, all that recreational boating. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary was founded by Congress in 1939 to provide a pool of trained volunteers to help out the Coast Guard in its day-to-day missions. When we're short of people to do one thing, you call up an auxiliarist to come and fill in. We can fill in on any mission the Coast Guard does except for those that involve direct military action or law enforcement actions. My forte is public affairs, so I get to take a lot of video of hard-working auxiliarists and active duty coasties doing the hard work while I kick back and take it easy. As a public affairs officer, I was on board one of the Coast Guard auxiliary safety boats. The radio crackled open with a call that there was a sailboat in distress outside of the harbor. The motor had broken down, couldn't get the sails up. They needed to be towed into port. And so we went out, ran a pattern, found that boat, lashed them with a stern tow, and then brought them back through the heavy waves into the harbor and into the marina. It was very adventurous, and my job was to put down my camera and hold the line that was towing the boat, so I actually get my hands dirty once in a while. And for that mission, we all received a team commendation, a special ribbon for a team that works efficiently together, which was really quite an honor. In 25 years of working as a Coast Guard auxiliarist, I've had the honor of serving with young active duty people from Guam to Puerto Rico, from Alaska to Florida, all of them hardcore, working hard, great attitude. They're always willing to go out and take on a tough task. It makes a local fellow like me feel awfully proud to be a small part of that team.
The civilian effort to both support and honor local service members in the Northland is constant.
Today we gather with heavy hearts to remember the tragic events of September 11th, 2001. Our own 148th Air National Guard Bulldogs were immediately called into action, as were soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines from around the country, active duty, Guard, and Reserve. I'm proud to have taken my turn with you, and like you, remember the nearly 7,000 who went overseas expecting to make it home, but never did. We remember as well all those who returned home, but were never the same.
Every year, members of the Air National Guard's 148th Fighter Wing, as well as local police officers and firefighters, gather at the Duluth Entertainment Convention Center to honor the firefighters who scaled the Twin Towers as they burned on September 11th. They do this by climbing the same number of steps that their New York City counterparts did on that fateful day.
Dear Lord, we gather together today to remember the events of September 11th, 2001, and we ask that you would be present with us. As we remember those who lost their lives, we pray that you would surround families and friends and all who grieve or are struggling with your comforting presence.
It is a moving sight and a chilling reminder that for soldiers of a certain generation, 9/11 is a tragedy that defined the nature of their service. For one local veteran of the Iraq War, her experience overseas impacted her so profoundly that she wrote a book about her revelations called Waging Peace.
After 9/11, I was called up to serve in the Iraq War. And when I got there, everything that I thought about war, it was entirely different than I thought. And so when I got there, I got asked or told that I would need to be able to run over a little Iraqi child if necessary. to protect my battle buddies. So everything that I thought I believed in, that soldiers have to make sacrifice, protect one life to save a life, take a life to save a life, none of it really felt true for me. And so I decided that between me, God, the world, everybody, that really wasn't who I was, that I was going to fight for life. And so I would step in front of a bullet for anybody, but I would never take a life. And so I took the bullets out of my gun, and for the rest of my 397 days in war, I decided that I was going to wage peace instead of waging war.
But for service members like Bobby Lane, who were sent during later phases of the Iraq War, the experience was somewhat different.
In 2006, I enlisted. I went to boot camp, and then right after that, my first deployment was in Iraq. Where we were in Iraq, the people that we relieved and the people that relieved us both seen action, but we were there at like a weird time because like it was way after the initial invasion, but before ISIS even existed. So we were there in a weird lull. We were just basically cops cruising around. It's basically what we were doing. And we'd throw candies at kids and stuff. You could see destroyed buildings. You could see that there was action in the area at one point. But when I was, there was a little bit. We'd seen a couple things. People injured coming through the base. We did get one person injured. That was like a whole thing.
When you see something that changes you, it requires some transformation for yourself, this like being who you are. And I feel like I couldn't change what war would require of me, and that's part of living through a war. You don't know who's going to die by lunch, but I could choose who I was going to be. And so disarming myself of violence felt like the only way that I was going to stay alive in the middle of a place that that could take things from you, but there were things that you could lose that were worse than losing your life.
I was a rear turret gunner.
Okay.
And so when the cars got too close to the convoy, I'd shoot the flare at the car. At the time, we just wanted to blow things up and shoot stuff, basically. That's what we wanted to do. But now it's probably better that I didn't know. At the time, though, I was definitely ready to go.
Meanwhile, Chance Fortune has the distinction of having served during two of the most highly politicized incidents of the early 2020s, the George Floyd protests in Minneapolis and the 2021 withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan.
I grew up as part of that Call of Duty generation, military video game shooter generation. My family, my dad was in the Navy, my grandpa was in the Army, so there was some generational influence there. All my family knew I was always going to be a soldier. It was just something that I always wanted to do. I was always fascinated with. Fast forward now, though, I have more knowledge, more experience. The entire Minnesota National Guard that was stateside at that time mobilized in response to the George Floyd, the fallout that happened shortly after. We responded to basically reinstate order in Minneapolis, and to just be a presence to dissuade any further property damage. I want to be very clear about this. We were not activated to stop protests. We were there to ensure peaceful protests took place. We stood and we let protesters protest and do what is their right to do as American citizens. We were there specifically to stop and prevent violence. We shortly after the Minnesota National Guard arrived in the city, it calmed down fairly quickly. We established a pretty heavy presence. We were doing a lot of humanitarian stuff, dropping water off for protest groups and schools and other people and other groups. We were cleaning up damage done in neighborhoods. We were cleaning up some of the damage and the looting as a result. So in addition to a security presence, we had humanitarian operations going on simultaneously. I served overseas in support of Operation Spartan Shield, which is a part of U.S. Central Command. That's going to be countries like Kuwait, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, a lot of those kind of Central Middle Eastern countries that we maintain a military presence in. I served the majority of my tour as a QRF force, which is a quick response force. Essentially, we were stationed in Kuwait, and we were just doing a lot of training, but we were always kind of keeping a state of readiness for if the call ever came up for us to respond anywhere else in the region. In August of 2021, that call came when we had to respond in Kabul, Afghanistan during the collapse of the Afghan government. So we mobilized to support the American withdrawal from Kabul, as well as like our allies. So that was support of allies, Operation Allies Refuge. The facility that we were guarding, the Kabul International Airport, was completely abandoned, and prior to being abandoned had been completely overrun and looted and ransacked. And so it had this very eerie ghost town, post-apocalypse, Mad Max feel to it, Apocalypse Now feel to it. And actually that's the Apocalypse Now is a really good comparison, because we really kind of went off the rails there for a little bit while we were there, just because the stress was so high, and we were working 12 hours on, 12 hours off, and when we weren't working, we were exploring and we were looking around. And so we were going through these abandoned buildings that had just been completely ripped out and gutted, and papers burned and things strewn about. The post exchange had been completely looted for anything valuable. We were looking for food because we weren't really getting a lot of food daily. You know, we were getting kind of very small portions of food that the 82nd Airborne chefs were able to make with what was left in the kitchens. We found a fleet, a motor pool of Ford Rangers that had belonged to the Afghan National Army that completely collapsed. And we just had this fleet of Ford Rangers that we were using to get around because otherwise we were on foot for the whole airport to get everywhere, and it's a big airport. And so we got these Ford Rangers that we were using to transport ourselves, to and from, and nobody told us to do that except for our own leadership. So, hey, get us some vehicles. Like the ANA is not using these things. Let's take them. So we made some what's called a technical truck. We mounted our machine guns that we brought in, our 240 Bravos. We mounted them to the back of these Ford Rangers, and we made our own technical trucks, is what we call them. I had an instance where we had intercepted Afghan nationals who had snuck in through like a sewer line or some sort of an underground pipe system, and we went in our trucks and we snatched them up as they were coming in. And we searched them, and then we escorted them back out, because there was a process for how we were letting people in. It wasn't that people we had to verify who they were before they could get on a plane to be flown out, because the purpose of the operation was to fly out Afghan nationals who had supported us during the war. But the State Department had a process for that. But these guys weren't following the process, so bag out the gate. I got these guys to the front gate, and it was absolute chaos at the front gate. There was a lot of private military contractors working, special operations, who weren't in uniform, so it was very difficult to identify where they were from. We sent these guys kind of packing out the front gate, where there was just this massive crowd of people pushing and shoving, trying to get through, while the Taliban was literally right on the other side of the gate, keeping people from getting in, searching people, because they were pulling people who they verified had supported us. They were pulling them out and executing them. And we sent these guys out and could see that they were scared to go back out. Sent them out. They got pulled into the crowd and lost right away. I don't know what happened to them. As we turned to leave, there was a shot that I did have a shot that, and a shot is close when it snaps and zips. So me and my buddy turned to leave, and there was a shot that rang, and there was a lot of shooting going on everywhere. I don't necessarily believe that they were targeting me. It's possible, because we were wearing very clear U.S. military uniforms. Everybody else who was around us was wearing private military, not nondescript clothing. We were wearing very obvious U.S. military uniforms. We turned to leave, and there was the crack right, by our ears, like kind of between the two of us, and it was only the one shot, and we kind of looked at each other, smiled, laughed, and we're like, that was close, and then turned and walked away. The Taliban were shooting rounds into the sky, and they were landing into the airport. They were basically lobbing rounds into the airport. So we had a few people who had rounds hit them in the helmet. One of the guys I worked with had a bullet actually go through his pant leg. But they were all like rounds that were coming down. It wasn't direct fire. I think my situation was a direct fire Like we were shot, someone shot between us. But a lot of rounds were just kind of pelleting us the whole time. It was really weird. That was a really unique situation, even for guys who served during that time in the military. We have been kind of repositioning our focus as a military, and we've been focusing more on large spectrum warfare again, and going up against what we would call a near peer adversary, someone who is close to us in capability. And that's kind of where we've shifted our focus. And that experience was something, but I'm glad that I have that experience, because I can kind of share that with guys who haven't gone yet, who haven't gone overseas to do that kind of a tour, and hopefully never have to, right? Been in for 12 years. I have about another 8 years till I'm retired. In that 8 years, I'm trying to contribute as much as I can, from what I've learned over the last 12 years of my service.
With Diana, Bobby, and Chance, we see different perspectives on what it's like to come into contact with modern warfare.
And so the purpose of war is peace. So people go to war to get peace. So nobody goes to war to get more war, and so they're the two sides of the same coin. So my goal and my vision is that we can actually create communities where more people stay alive this year than die, whether that's from systemic issues, whether that's just gun violence, whether that's because people aren't being able to sleep inside when it gets to be below 0 in the winter, that these are all, these aren't inevitable things, they're just things that need more of us to show up for. We are gonna ask Duluthians to look for anyone who is making a positive change. So a peace hero is anyone who's making a positive change right where they live. And so to nominate someone in their classroom, a coworker, a neighbor, maybe somebody in your church is just awesome. Maybe it's a Sunday school teacher. Parents, you can nominate your kids. But we are going to look around where we live for someone who's making a positive change. And then we're going to use the power of our voice to honor that person by nominating them to be a peace hero.
Welcome to the inaugural Duluth Peace Hero Awards ceremony. We are here to honor those who are making a positive change, a peace hero.
I never really cared about peace. I thought it was kind of something growing up that people said was for hippy dippies or people who didn't really understand sacrifice or how the world worked. And all that changed when I was sent as a combat medic to the Iraq War. I thought, why not wage peace and get what we actually want and do it here where we live, in the place that we love, in the place where we send our kids to school, and the places where we go to work. So that's what we're doing, and we put out the call, and we had over like 104 nominations.
When you see a need, you go out there and help them. Don't wait till the next person do it.
I think that war and peace are two sides of the same coin. So every time we talk about one, we should be talking about the other. But I find that people are very uncomfortable when we talk about peace. But once you see war, and once you see how costly it is, and how dysfunctional it is, you see that peace is actually worth it.
As Kathleen promised when we filmed with her in the summer at Forest Hill Cemetery,
we got one of the monuments here. It's in the, it'll be installed this fall.
In autumn, she invited us back to witness the fruits of her labor.
Helmer Axel Eriksson, a marker that is 105 years late, and it is being dedicated on the very day to the date that he was buried 105 years ago. This is a very special day. He died October 2nd at the age of 29. His obituary, published in the Duluth newspaper, indicated there were no family members, there were no friends. There was no one to escort the body, so the American Legion commander of the David Wisted Post stepped up. He and the members came, brought Helmer to this spot, buried him. He had full military honors at the time. Because there was no marker last summer when my team was here cleaning this area, I approached the cemetery and said, what can we do about this? We need a marker for this guy, and we need a marker for the 2 others who are missing. They're from the Civil War. And they told me what I needed to do. I filled out the paperwork, and since the government is sometimes confusing to me, I took it directly to Congressman Stauber's office and said, please, can you help me with this? And it was through the efforts of his office that we got this marker within 6 weeks.
This is how America honors our veterans. Kathleen, you and your group to do this is phenomenal. Duluth Honor Guard, all you are here because you love our veterans and honor our veterans, no matter how long ago it was, 105 years ago. This is amazing. He immigrated from Sweden, served our country, helped get our troops ready to fight. And here we are, 105 years later after his death, honoring his life of service to this great nation.
Bugler, sound tap.
Do you feel that your work here at Forest Hill is now complete, or is there more work to be done?
Oh, there's more work to be done.
Like Kathleen articulates, the goal of preserving history in general, and military history specifically, is a job that never ends. It is an objective that can never be completed, because there are always more and more layers to be uncovered. No account of military history can be truly exhaustive. In this documentary, we have only scratched the surface of our region's role in America's armed forces. The goal, then, has not been to be the final statement on Northland military history, but rather a significant part of an ongoing conversation. A quick library search reveals a body of local work that's been done to uncover Northland military narratives, from academic historical accounts to deeply personal publications on the subject. From the first Minnesota volunteers, who were the initial soldiers to respond to Lincoln's call in the Civil War.
By happenstance, the governor of Minnesota was in Washington, D.C. at that time, and was the first governor to volunteer the raising, equipping, and training of a regiment.
To the role of local female service members in the Vietnam War, from the POW camps located around the state of Minnesota during World War II, to how the first American shots fired in World War II came from Minnesota soldiers.
A mini submarine several miles out of Pearl Harbor that was detected by the USS Ward. That weapon that was used to fire that shot is actually in Minnesota State Capitol now.
With intersecting context and perspectives, layers upon layers of history bring us ever closer to understanding what it means to serve as a Northlander.
There was a woman from Minnesota at Pearl Harbor. Ruth Erickson was 4,000 miles from her hometown of Virginia, Minnesota, when fighter planes began bombing the naval base where she was stationed. Over 300 women joined the armed forces from the Iron Range area.
And what it means to remember those who served.
And this is from 1893, when he was 28.
Which one was your grandfather?
Right there.
As other people will tell you, there is a camaraderie that is totally unexplainable to people who have never served in the military.
And I'm also a third-generation Army veteran, so everybody in my family truly has served.
My dad was a corpsman, a Navy corpsman.
I was in the Navy, you know, not glamorous, but that's okay.
But a lot of kids, it really helped them.
I really enjoyed my time in the military. It was the best years of my life.
How our service members define us
There's only 2 Air Guard or even 2 Air Force locations in the state. So I've seen our impact directly of what we've been able to do.
We don't have this mindset of like, oh, we're just National Guard. We're in the Army and we're going to serve.
Like many others before me, I may do this until the day I die.
And perhaps most importantly, how our region fits into the history of our nation.
We're proud to be veterans and proud Minnesotans also.